So let's start and focus on transparency. We don't have a lot of time. I mean, we have a lot of information and just 1 hour. So transparency inside of PitStop Pro. One big important information that I have to give already is there is no flattening of transparency in PitStop Pro. What you could do in PitStop Pro is if you go to your pre-flight profile and you would create a new pre-flight profile, you will have a category that focuses on transparency, right? If we look at the checks that are available inside of pre-flight profile, is really we're making the objects opaque, but we don't flatten. So first thing you have to realize when we talk about PitStop and we talk about transparency, we don't flatten transparency. You will have to go and take a look at one of our other products, which is called the PitStop Server. That one does have a built-in flattening of the transparency. Another way that you could do flattening of transparency is using Acrobat, of course. There's a little link inside of the inspector, as I see it open, that you can see open right here, inside of the fill and stroke first category and the bottom option. You will have on the right side under the actions a link to use Acrobat. Again, as you can see, we have a couple of options here, but not real flattening of your file. Therefore, you will have to use the flattening from Acrobat, or if you have a PitStop server, you can use it there. Another thing I can mention, or that I would like to mention, is we do have certain action lists where we're going to rasterize the whole document. So it's not really flattening, but it would be a way for you to kind of make sure that you have all images and not kind of the transparency layers. Where can you find that? It's under the repurposing, and then here you can find it mentions at this moment it has the iPad in the name. That's how you can find it. But just remember that these 4 action lists can be used to rasterize your complete document, depending on if you want to rasterize images and keep your text, and depending on the compression, a zip or a JPEG will depend, of course, the size of your outgoing product or your outgoing PDF file. So depending if you would do a zip file, of course, it's gonna be, the file size will be bigger than if you would do a JPEG. Right? So again, to summarize, not real flattening transparency. There are checks to see if there is transparency in your document and keep you informed about that. But if you want to do flattening, you will have to look into the PitStop server. And for those who would have a PitStop server, I can show you where you can find that. It's inside of the hot folder, and then you would have a flattening option. So every job that will go through this hot folder, you can set it up to flatten transparency. Okay, so Michael, if there are any questions related to this, or Steve?
Not to transparency issues. There's other ones, but go ahead.
Okay, well, that is the cover for the transparency. Like I said, the most important thing to realize is there's not a real flattening transparency. Only checks and really making the objects opaque is an option.
There is one question here, Natasha, that someone asked, and maybe it's related. It says, okay, we have files that, after running through PitStop, look good on the screen, but certain elements print solid on all 4 plates, creating a 400% black. What is the cause of this? Is this related to anything that we're talking about here with the transparencies?
First guess would be no. Okay. My guess would be that there is a color conversion done, and in that color conversion, depending on the ICC profiles, that is the result after the color conversion.
Well, why don't we?
But that is the first guess.
Let's use that as a segue into the color issues. And again, if anyone has any questions on transparencies, they can continue to write those in. We can still cover those here at the end, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit about managing color, since that was like second on our list of things that people had questions about.
Okay, perfect. So what is important when we do color conversion? Well, there is a color management inside of PitStop Pro. Where can you find it? It's inside of in my case, I'm working on a Mac, so under the Acrobat menu preferences. On a PC, it would be under the edit menu. So when we go into our preferences, we can see here that we have a color management category. Now, if I would open, you can see there's presets, so I can create color management presets. What does that mean? It's just a setup or a configuration of ICC profiles, right? If you're gonna go and do any conversion from RGB, from gray, from any of the color spaces to another color space, ICC profiles will be used, and they will be responsible for the result of your conversion. By default, we have some generic ICC profiles. What is good to know, those default ICC profiles are not the world's greatest. We are aware of that, and we will improve that in the future. So if you are having color converting issues, please go and take a look at your color management and make sure if you have your own color profiles to select those instead of your generic or the by default selected ICC profiles from PitStop.
So
you
Natasha,
can also see, yeah.
Okay, just to confirm, so what you're saying is the crux of most people's problems when it comes to the RGB to CMYK conversion is right here in which ICC profile they have selected for that type of conversion. So if I'm getting flat looking images or things that don't look as vibrant anymore, or maybe my conversion to gray is not looking good and looking washed out, this is where it all comes from, correct?
That is correct. And that is like, if I would not mention this and go into the product and say, oh, using the inspector, just making a conversion from, for example, here from RGB to CMYK, this result is related to what I have here. But some of our customers are not aware of that. They just do the conversion and they're like, oh, it's not good. It's because this is in the background. This is enabled, so it will be used to do the conversion.
So really finding the right profile that works well for the different conversions and then making sure that they're imported and selected in PitStop Pro, that's where how you're going to solve this problem.
Correct, definitely. It is sometimes a little task to find your correct ICC profiles. We get questions asking which ICC profile should I be using. It's very hard for us to answer that because we don't really know what you want to have as a result. So we always...
Go ahead. I was going to ask you a separate question of, can people, like if they have successful profiles that are working well, let's say in Photoshop for them, are they able to import those sort of profiles into PitStop Pro? Export them out of Photoshop or find them in the Photoshop library and then import them?
Well, normally if ICC profiles are available, like for example here in the drop down, that means they are installed on the system. So they will be available for any product on your system or application on your system that takes a look at system ICC profiles. So it's a matter of installing it, and then if you have it on that system, you can use it. And related to that question, Michael, you can select for your color management engine, you can select the Adobe color management engine, and this one is one that is offered by Adobe for free, and it is the same one that is used in Photoshop. And you can also notice that you have the option then to use the black point compensation.
So what does the little CMS stand for? Is that just like, smaller files, or is it just a little itty bitty CMS? I mean, what's that all about?
The little CMS is another color engine. It's not used a lot, but it's an open source color management engine. So it's kind of like an extra option you have where you don't have to pay money. But
It's
because
also
Adobe,
it's also limited how much you can make changes in. When they say little, you can only do a couple things or more than a couple, but not as much as you can usually do in the other
with the
CMMs.
Adobe, yep.
So if I
But
had
so
some,
as
so
of course a lot of our customers are using the Adobe products, this one is of course recommended, but it's all gonna, it's something you're gonna have to test a little bit with. Take your most sensible files and play with those when setting up your color management.
great.
And as I was just saying, the black point compensation for those who are working with black and grays, that is one to make sure that you're, and that would be the question or the kind of the option that I would tell the customer to do that has a question about that, getting like a full black. Maybe if they turn on the black point compensation, they keep their shades and it don't turn into a complete black, because that is kind of what you're gonna do with the black point compensation. But
Is
this is the key.
is there any kind of like recommended setting or any profiles that we found to just be generically good profiles to select to get sort of the best results, like like you would expect in like Photoshop's defaults or something like that? Do we have any
Uh,
recommendations we can give, or is it really up to the individual user to kind of see what works best for them?
Yeah, it's. I'm afraid there's not something I can recommend, as it really depends on the files you're using and where you want to go to. Like some customers do want to have it flat, some customers do want more shades. So it's a little bit hard to tell the customer which one to select. It's a trial and error, I'm afraid. You can, of course, go online and ask some color experts or ask other PitStop Pro users, but it might work for them, but it doesn't work for you. So I would really recommend to just use your files, use the profiles that you have, and work with that. If you can't get there, you can always email us, for some tips or some tricks. But it's really on your system, because the system Mac compared to Windows is also a difference. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So it's best to work on your system, work with the profiles you have, and go from there.
Is it now? I see there that you can enable color management. What happens if I disable color management? I mean, is it just what is it using for the defaults of the conversions, or will it just not allow conversions?
No, it will allow conversions, but the system will be responsible for color conversions for the results. What kind of ICC profiles? The system will take care of that. So no more Adobe color management or nothing inside of PitStop anymore. It will be ruled outside of PitStop, but conversions will be done. I can show you that's not it's not gonna not allow you to convert anymore.
Great. All right. Well, continue on, and then there's definitely some myriad of questions in this particular area. A lot of interest here.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to add when we are talking about the color management, as you can see here, you can set up general settings, meaning what are we going to do all objects, but you can of course split it up. So how are we going to deal with vector-based objects, and how we're going to deal with what kind of ICC profiles we're going to use for images. Also very important and very interesting to know that there is a way to set it up so those are treated independently. Another option that is worth mentioning is grab your current Acrobat preferences. So if you like how it goes in Acrobat, you can just ask PitStop to grab those exact same preferences and apply them to your PitStop Pro. So that is kind of nice to know. Another thing that's for the new product, since our version 10, those color presets are available inside, well, in your Tools tab for the Acrobat 10 users. So you can easily switch from one color management or preset to another. This is new. This is introduced since our version 10. So this just some information. If you would have to constantly work with different types of files, then it has to be US, then it has to be Europe, then it requires flattening, then it requires, I mean, like flat of the gray, then it means to keep the shades. So if you have different jobs you have to work with, you can set up different presets and then just switch between jobs, which makes it a little bit easier as you just select your color preset here. Now, when we are going to do our color conversions, right? Easiest thing, inspector, you just have your color space of your current object. You can convert it easily to a spot, to another color space. So that is kind of easy. You can tag an ICC profile if you want to do that. You can do this if you want to do it globally. We're going to talk about global changes. And then one I would like to highlight is a change specific color. So you're going to select something in your document, you're going to grab it, and then you're going to say, I'm going to convert it to another color. Right? So that is one of the options you have if you want to change a color globally, so not using the inspector. Again, remember, the color conversion results will be done by the ICC profiles. Here, you're just going to say where you're going to go to. If you, of course, specify a specific percentage, then you will go to that percentage no matter what ICC profile you have selected. Now, one of the questions that I received from a customer was related to spot colors. They want to keep their tint. So if we have, for example, here we have 15%, 30%, 45%, and you want to remap that, you want to change that to another spot color, but you would like to keep the same percentage, well, then you can take a look at your color again under the global change inside of the color category. You can use your remap color where you're gonna select your, for example, your spot color. In this case, I selected the specific percentage. So it would be better for me to make sure that I select my spot color no matter what tint it is. So I'm going to use this little icon, which is called the color picker, to select the Pantone color of my document. You can see here I have a list of all my document spot colors. I picked the one that I have here. It's 535C. So I pick this specific color. I say OK, and then we can just remap it to another spot color. So as you can see, we're remapping the channel, not a color space, not a specific color. Okay. Now you can save the global change. You can also, what is nice to know, and that is available in our newer versions, is you can do a right click and you can save this as an action list, which then would be possible for you to use in a PitStop server, in a switch workflow. You could use it in Instant, any of our other products. You would be able to use this action list, as a global change is very specific for PitStop Pro only. So you cannot use a global change outside of PitStop Pro. So if we would run the global change, you can see that my spot color has been changed and I kept my percentage. This is also something new since our 10 version. If you have an older version, you will not be able to do that, as the remapping of channels is introduced since version 10. Right? You can also see that in the global change you have a couple of other options, right? You have a couple of global changes, and if you go to the action list and you go into the color category, you have much more options, right? One thing to remember, if you're going to start or if you're going to use any of these actions, you have to remember that it's the name of the action list tells you what we're going to do, right? But keep in mind that there's still some specific selections inside of the action list. So if you use one of these action lists and it's not doing what you're expected to do, then you better double click it, for example, in this case, and you if you are able to read this action list. If you don't really understand, then you can definitely email us and ask, but you have to read what the selection is to know what's going to happen. So in this case, we have convert color to gray and keep black text. So if we read this specific action list, we're going to see, we're going to select text segments, so only text in a specific color, which in this case could be either, because there's an R involved, either it has 100% of CMYK black in its fill or in its stroke, and then we're going to inverse our selection, which means we're going to select everything except the text that has 100% CMYK black fill or stroke. So why I want to highlight this, for all those customers who have text segments which are in RGB or they are gray or any of the others, they will be converted to gray and not keeping that 100%. Because remember, in this selection, it's not in there. So if you read convert color to gray and keep black text, we're only going to keep the 100% CMYK black, not all the rest of your text. It's the question I get regularly from customers. They're like, hey, I'm using this action list, but my text is not black. Yes, it's because of this, right? So the actions that we do offer or that we do give you by default in the installation do have some specific selections. So it's for you to start with. It doesn't mean it's going to do exactly what you need to have, right? So when I continue, we're going to convert everything except that 100% text to gray. And then we're going to, here you can see, again, we're going to make that same selection of text, and we're going to remap that color to gray, meaning no shades, a solid black. But again, this selection is only these specific text selections. So only the ones with 100% K from CMYK. So if you have a gray RGB and ICC tag, it's not going to get converted, right? Very important. I get a lot of questions about this, right? When I'm here and highlighting this, this is the power of PitStop Pro, the selections in the action lists. But you have to read it. You have to play with it. The selection is important. You have to tell PitStop what you want to do, which kind of text you want to select, and which one you want to convert. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of actions available by default, but that doesn't mean, again, that it will be exactly what you need today in your workflow. You might need a little bit adjustment to one of those actions, right? What you could do is you can always start from one. If you double click, you make a change, it will ask you to save locally, and you have a duplicate, and you can work on that one, right? If you are playing, like for example, let us say, just to get you a little bit of idea, if I would start a brand new action list, and let us say we want to select all that text and make sure it turns to black text. Well, the easiest way to start with an action list is kind of putting in a little text, a little filter on the top, on the left top, and then you can just drag and drop your action list to the actions field, or you can double click it to add it to the list. Now, again, selection is important. So next to text, we want to select color. So I'm going to type in color as filter to get only my actions. I know this by heart, but for you, just think of what you want to do. You type in the filter, and then you can see you have changes, checks, convert, and remapping and selection. So you know your select's going to be on the bottom. Here, for example, you can have a select color. So this is where you can set up what kind of text segments you want to select. What is the color you have in your document that you want to make sure, if it's a text, that it stays 100%, that it stays a solid black. So you select your color space, you set up where you want to go to. Another important one, or another one that is when we're talking about text and conversion, is the select color range. Why is it important? Because we can say from a certain percentage to a certain percentage. If you know my text could, it could be either from 2 to 5 or something, but I want to make sure all of that is selected and converted, you have to make sure you add that to it, right? Very important, or very interesting. I get these kind of questions almost daily from customers who kind of get stuck into the conversion, and they're getting brown text, their text is not black, and so on and so on. So the action lists are really is really the tool to play with when it comes to conversions and keeping your black text, doing spot color conversion. And like I also mentioned, a global change can be converted to an action list. So for example, if I would say, if the one, remember, we're going to remap our spot color to another spot color, keep our tint, we can just save this as an action list, and then you can see how this looks like in my action list. So this is also how you can learn how to create your actions. You have your global change, you know exactly what you're doing in your global change, save it as an action list, and then you can learn how an action list is built up. Right? I think let's do a couple of questions, guys.
All right.
So to
Yeah.
see if there's
Lots. You covered a ton there, and some of these questions, I mean, we got a lot in the color arena, so some of these may be sort of repeat. So if they are, just say we've covered that.
okay.
We came across an ad that has two spot colors, but when I convert them in Ink Manager, the objects with spot colors will disappear. Any idea what happens?
How did they do it? First question would be, how do they do the remapping? Do they use an action list? Do they use a global change? How did they set it up?
That seems, well, they're saying they're doing it in Ink Manager, so.
Ink Manager, it's not something that sounds familiar for PitStop Pro. If they're talking about the
maybe they mean the inspector or the navigator?
The droplet?
Yeah, or the color picker. If they're talking about this one, which is your, but here you can't really remap, or you can't really make any change or run it on the document. So we need a little bit more details. Normally, if something disappears, right, 90% in the cases when something disappears, it's because there's an action, say, remove objects outside of certain bleed box, well, not a bleed box, a page box. So if you have inside of your action, select all the objects outside of the media box and then change some colors, you're going to remove something in certain cases.
It says here that they said we did this in print production under output preview. So it sounds like they were using some of the Acrobat tools.
That is correct. Output preview, and they put it here now. I think I have it, one of these. I think it's this one. Yep, this is a Acrobat feature, not a PitStop Pro feature. It is this one. And here's the Ink Manager, so I'm guessing they use this one. Yep.
All right, so
not a PitStop Pro feature.
All right, let's see if we can find. Boy, there's a lot of questions.
Here's a basic one. What's BPC and no BPC?
Black point compensation. Okay. We covered that under the presets where I mentioned if you use Adobe Color Management, you could ask, or you can set it up to use black point compensation, where you're gonna make sure your black, if you have different shades of black, that you keep those shades of black and you don't have like a flat black after conversion. So it all has to do with ISOC profiles and color conversion.
Great. So you want to just give a brief explanation of the difference between PitStop Pro and Server? I know that shouldn't be in the color thing, but I think it's probably good just to maybe transition to something else now. But if you would just quickly do that.
The PitStop Pro and the PitStop Server. PitStop Pro Acrobat plugin, PitStop Server standalone, PitStop Server for maybe 50 files or plus per day, as it is a hot folder based application where you can use pre-flight profiles and action lists, but you will not open the files manually. The files will be dropped in a folder and will be processed and outputted. And I think Pro, you open the file and you run.
Go ahead, Natasha. I'm sorry. This thing, there's always a delay, so when you hear us trying to cut into each other, we always end up cutting each other off. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, so The other thing I was gonna say is with the PitStop Pro, you open file per file and you run one of these specific presets. With the PitStop server, you will drop your files into an input flow and everything gets processed. So you don't see the file constantly being processed. In PitStop Pro, you do. So PitStop Pro is when you do 50 or less files a day, I would say, even maybe a little bit less than that, because you're gonna have to do opening and closing. And if you have to do, for example, here you have a spelling, a misspelling, to fix that misspelling, for example, little things you cannot select by an action list. You're gonna have to go into the product or into the PDF, go to the page, adjust the page, and then save your PDF file. That is not something you can do with PitStop Server. PitStop Server, you will have to have an action list or a pre-flight profile to do it.
So I'm just kind of curious, out of the attendees that we have here right now, how many people think that something like, well, first of all, how many people, use the little raise your hand icon, how many people have PitStop Server today, of the people that are out there right now? If you use the little raise your hand icon, I just want to get a feel for how many people we got with PitStop Server. Okay, good, good. I'm going to put everyone's hand down for a second. I'm just kind of curious, how many people think that PitStop Server may be something that would be useful for them in their particular production that doesn't have it today already? So essentially, I mean, just to kind of, to summarize for people, that the PitStop Server is really, if you're running a volume of work and you got a workflow system in place, or you got some good volume of work coming in where you're constantly checking, or you need to use action lists, because that's the other cool thing about PitStop Server is it can do the corrections too. So the conversion of like Microsoft Word documents to fix the black problems out of Microsoft Word PDFs, those can all be automated with like PitStop Server. And obviously, if you want more information about PitStop Server, Steve can help you out there and get you hooked up. So just drop us an email afterwards and we can tell you some more. So what's our next subject on the list here?
Just one more before you jump in. PitStop Server can work independently of Switch. The question is, can PitStop Server work independently of Switch? And yes, it can. It's a standalone product, and we can show you that here later.
Yep. PitStop Server is a standalone application, so you can run it inside of Switch or just by itself, do processing by itself, and let Switch do something else. Definitely.
I think the next one, Michael, is page size and bleeds.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Page size and bleed. That is what I had in my list as well. Yep. From the emails we have received, we had quite some customers looking for some answers when it comes to page sizes, adjusting page sizes, adding crop marks, adding bleeds, adding trim marks, all of that good stuff. So basic, what I want to show is the inspector, as a lot of our customers are not aware of where you can find it and how you can do it. So for example, I go to the position category in my inspector and I go to the edit page boxes. Here you can see all my page boxes are listed out, right? I can see what are the width and the height of those page boxes. Now, before I say anything, when I'm gonna adjust anything here, it will not make a change of the page content. What we're gonna do is just adjust page sizes. Our media box size is our page size, is what we're really gonna have the size of our paper to print on, for example. Our trim box is just for us to visually see where we're gonna print. Our bleed box is to tell application, hey, my bleed needs to go at least all the way to this box, right? Is to see what kind of bleed we have. The art and the crop box are boxes that most of the times are created by InDesign or Illustrator. So PDF would have it after being created by any of the CS applications. Now, in this little powerful category or option inside the inspector, you can really go ahead and say, hey, I I want to remove the crop and the art. The reason why I'm doing this is because the art and the crop box don't really help you unless there are specific cases. I do know there are some customers with specific cases where they need the crop and the art. I would say 80% of the other customers, they don't need it. So my first step is always to remove them, because the crop box will visually can give you some issues, because the crop will like not show you the whole page size, but just until the crop box, right? So I remove those, and then let's say we want to enlarge our media box. We select our box in the list. We select our anchor point, and I know one of the customers asked, how can I do a change of my boxes and have an anchor point? This could be a way. I type in my new size. I'm just going to keep it very easy, and I just type it in, and that's it. So in this case, I did change my page size. So if I would go here, you can see that my page size did change, but my page content is still the same. I did not scale. I didn't do anything. I just changed the page box. The trim box is still the same. Now, if I want to create like a bleed box, we can say we can put half on it so you can see your bleed box. So in this case, the only thing we've done here is just to increase our page size and change our bleed box, right? So you can play with this. You can you can start from the trim box. If your trim box is where you have to end up with, so you're going to have to go inside, you have to do it the opposite. So you're going to have to decrease the size of your trim box. But this is a very handy place in the inspector if you have to do certain page changes, right? Now, in the actions, you can now say to apply these page boxes to all pages. If you have already trim marks and bleed marks, you can use the set by detection to select your box, and then your bleed box will be set to the bleed marks you already have. Here, if you want to set a certain box to another box, so you want to say, hey, my bleed box should be the size of my media box, then you can also select it there. You can also, if you have a lot of templates, and we used to have something that's called the cropping templates. We don't have that any longer. We now have the design layout panel. And for the customer that asked the question about the cropping, I will show you later how you can do that. We're going to do that with an action list, and you will see that you will be able to use that for all of your files. So before I go there, I would like to show the design layout panel. So if you would have to create templates for your documents coming in, so always the same trim, bleed, and media box, for example, you can set up what we call a design layout. Now, if I open one of these, it don't really matter which one I open. I just want to go through it so you have an idea. The page box is what you're going to do. You're going to have a pre-press layout, a screen viewing, or no layout. Most of the times, it will be a pre-press layout. Now, how do we read this? This is kind of the tricky thing, but if you play with it a little bit and if you have this information, you will be able to set up your own design templates. You have to read from the top. So we start from the trim box, and we're going to attempt to detect the trim box using. If there are trim marks, create my trim box on those trim marks. So if you have different page sizes coming in, but they have trim marks, we will know what the size of the trim box will be depending on the page coming in. So if you have trim marks, then we will use this. If you don't have trim marks, we can say use an already existing box. And you can give us a specific offset with an anchor point. If this attempt fails, so if there is, if for example, like remember, I removed the crop box. So if I say same as existing, the crop box will not be there. So all of these will not work. Then we're going to say, if you can't find it, set up my trim box with this size and this anchor point, for example. Right? Now the same thing, or not the same thing, but how you have to see is the trim box is where we start from. Then from the trim box on, we're going to build the bleed box if you want to have one. Presenter, absent. Again, if there are marks, take the marks. If there are no marks, I want it to be how many inches you want it from the trim box, and then for the media box, how much do you want it from the trim box. The crop and the art box can be set to be present or not present. So again, the trim box is where you start from. You give the size, you give an anchor point, or you use, if you have different page sizes, different jobs with different page sizes, you can let it snap to the marks that are already in there. You can also set up guides in these specific templates or design layouts. You can set up, excuse me, you can set up zones. For example, there is a certain part in the PDF that nobody can print, so you want to make sure there's no design in it. You set up a zone, and then you can use actions to add specifically crop marks on any of the things you want to add. These are the action lists that you can integrate into your design layout. As you can see also that here on my document, if I activate this specific design layout, you can see, you can get a visual ID of what the template will do. So if I will select one of the other ones, you can see that there will be a different way of showing how it would look like. So that is the design layout panel. Why I want to mention it? Because what if you want to automate this? You have built your design layout and you're happy with it. Well, then you can make sure that, and I have to double check here which one it is, apply page boxes. So here you can select the design layout that you have created, and then you can use it. Now remember, why I want to show this as well, because you can save it as an action. So I hope you can see the steps here. You create your design layout. If you know that one works well, you create your global changes, because the action list you're a little bit scared of. You create your design layout, and then you save your design layout as an action list, and you have created your own action list. And as you can see here, there's a lot going on, but you were not aware of it because you just used the interface to create the design layout, create the global changes, and we did all the rest. So here you can see that an action list is created depending on your design layout. Right? Again, a nice way for you to learn how to work with actions, to learn how to deal with actions. Okay? So now what I would like to show is, for example, the one of the questions that we had from the customers. So I'm going to go to this page. I'm going to deactivate my design layout because we're not going to use it for now. Deactivate it, right? And now a customer had a question that they have these kind of files, so they want to make sure, if I turn on my page boxes view, which you can find into the page box category, you can see my page boxes. So in this case, I only have a media box. You can also remember in the inspector, I can also see what my page box is. So the customer used cropping trim template to kind of remove everything outside and have everything cropped to the trim. Now you can create an action list for that, and I have created one up front, but I will go into it to show you how it looked like. I just have to find it back. Let me see here. I have too many in my list. Yep, here, change the boxes and crop to trim size. Now if I run this on my document, you will see that everything has been cropped and everything has been removed. So I just end up with this as my page, right? So instead of using the cropping templates, it would be a good idea to create an action list, and then again, it will be available in any of our other products, but it will do the job, and you will have your page ended up as a trim size. So now if I would go inside of this action list, again, remember the filter. You can see I have a lot of boxes here, and so you could use box as a filter to find your specific boxes. But what you have to understand is you just select what you want to do. So in this case, as you can see, I always remove the art and the crop box. I remove the bleed box, and then I use the trim and the bleed marks to set my page boxes, and so on and so on. I select my objects outside of my region and I removed all my objects. Right? You change your media box to your trim box. So you have to think of what you're going to be doing when you're doing that. And the easiest way, do it here first, right? As you can see, I removed this, I changed this. That's all, that's 4 action lists. Remove crop box, remove art box, change trim box, and change bleed box, right? So those are the actions you have to use to create this into an automatically way instead of the inspector.
Tasha, on each of those,
Another thing you can do is, yeah.
so sorry about that. On each of those, you need to set up a different action list for documents of different sizes or for your most common sizes. Is that how that works?
No, what you could do inside of the actions.
Uh-huh.
I have to see because there's an echo. You can see here, you can resize just with certain inches. So you can say it don't matter what size comes in. You just tell it to resize a certain inch. So in this case, you don't really care about it. You just give the resizing of the amount of inches to resize. You can of course define a new rectangle, or you can use an existing box. So it's all going to depend on what you have. But for the size itself, if you can work with the resizing with a certain amount of inches, that would be independent on the page sizes that you have coming in. What I noticed from questions from customers that it will always be a little bit different for a couple of jobs. They might have 4 different jobs that require 4 different action lists. But besides that, most of the jobs will be covered by those 4 action lists. There might be a slight difference in marks or anything like that, but that is definitely something you have to do in action lists, because you're not going to be able to do it with the pre-flight profile. You can use the inspector, but then you can't do it automatically. Or you can do
Muted.
pages, or there's limitations. So creating an action list would be the way to go. As you can see here, we have added, so you're adding your page boxes depending on the ones you want to add, the trim or the bleed, depending on the style. And you're gonna again resize. As you can see, here's an example. I don't care what comes in, just add a 1/4 of an inch on all sizes. Add an 1/8 of an inch on every size, and then change the bleed so the bleed is adjusted for this document.
Unmuted.
All right, great. So there's, if I heard you right, there's like 4 different action lists that are really important for people to get to know of when they're dealing with resizing their pages and working with bleeds and bleed boxes and that sort of thing, correct?
Yep, you have to deal with the page box action list, which you can find by filtering out on box. You have the bleeds. So if you filter on bleed, you will find on objects, you will find the actions you can use. And then you have, if you would filter on marks, you will find certain actions related to marks. But like I said, think of what you're doing first, and then just add it to the list. Like, what do I want to do? Oh, I have to resize. If I have a trim coming in 8.5 by 11, I have to have a 1/4 of an inch bleed. So I have to enlarge my bleed box by 1/4 of an inch. Okay, if I have that, then I want to make sure that all my objects get bleed. So I want to adjust bleed. After that, I want to make sure my media box gets enlarged, or my page size needs to be like the size of my bleed box. So that's how you think, and that's how you set up your actions.
Now I know from my own personal experience that, like, when I'm enlarging the bleeds or essentially taking the artwork and extending it out, to match my new bleed box. I've run into some problems before where some of the objects didn't extend or didn't bleed because even though they look like they're right there at the edge of the trim box, they might be off maybe a half a point or something like that, and so they didn't get extended. Can you? And sometimes I've seen where images don't extend either. So can you explain to people why that happens?
Yes, definitely. If we look into the extend bleeds, if we look into the extend bleed global change, so everybody knows where you can do this, you can see that you have a distance to the trim box and then extend a certain way. Before we say anything, when we're extending bleeds, we're only going to extend paths. We're only going to extend vector-based objects. So if you have an image with a clipping path, and if you, not even talking about extending bleed or anything like that, you select that image and you delete the clipping path. If your image is still the same size than before you deleted it, it's not gonna be extended because the only thing we will do is extend the clipping path on top of the image. So if you would have a clipping path on on an image and you would remove the clipping path and your image is like double the size, then we will be able to give you bleed. Because the only thing we do is we just, if you, for example, see here, if we go, um, I think this one. So you can see here, you can see the blue dots, right? That is the rectangle of my image. I don't think I do. So I do have some clipping paths here, but if I would delete these and the image would still be the same size, like in this case, it don't matter if I go and extend these clipping paths. I'm not gonna get anything. So that is the biggest thing you have to be aware of. If it's an image, we're only gonna extend the clipping paths on top of who are on top of the image. With vector-based objects, we're also gonna extend the paths, the anchor points, but then you know that it's gonna work because we're just creating a bigger object,
How,
right?
how
Then
about
when we go back to how the extending bleed works, we're first gonna look into how close to the trim box. So in this little image, you can see this is our trim box. The dashed line is our imaginary trim box. So we are gonna look in between the distance, right, from here to here. And if we find objects, those will be triggered. And then we're gonna say, in this case, the bleed to the bleed box. Of course, important, you have to have a bleed box, or you say bleed beyond the trim box. So you want to say, oh, it has to be at least an inch or a quarter of an inch outside of my trim box, right? So two important things with images, it depends on the clipping path, and you're gonna have to, if you're gonna use the extend bleed action or a global change, you have to make sure you set up your distance, and this one is less important than the first one, the objects you want to trigger.
Yeah, because I know myself that having that tolerance set correctly, and a lot of times I found it was like setting it for just a couple points, just so it would capture that data that was real close to the edge, visually looked like it extended to the edge, but didn't go beyond the edge. So just setting that tolerance is very important. Otherwise, sometimes you'll just see objects that don't do anything.
Yep. Yep, definitely. That's a little bit the tricky part, but if you work with that, then normally you should be able. But again, like you saw me just removing that clipping part, if you do that yourself and the image is still the same size, then no bleed is going to be added. That's a little test you can do before you even start, because you can waste an hour trying to figure this out, and you could have already seen in 5 minutes, oh, I was not going to get anything anyway. So, but that doesn't mean it will be on every PDF. It will all depend on how the PDF is created. So if you do receive PDF files that sometimes have no bleed, try to inform your customer or the person that is sending you the PDF file to really keep an eye on that. And it's okay if they don't create the bleed, but just make sure they have clipping paths with information underneath so you can fix it with PitStop.
Natasha, do we have on Enfocus.com, do we have practice or sample files that they could use to practice with?
No, I'm afraid not.
No, we don't. Okay.
No. What a customer always can do, in any case, they can always send us their file and we can work on it. But I'm afraid that the files we have are our test files for internal use only. Okay. So it might be something I can check with product management to see if we could do that. I mean,
Jacqueline is asking if there's specific files that they can practice with to see if it's something that, you know, the way that you described it. So it might be something that.
It's a good idea. I mean, yeah. I will talk to product management to see what we can do. If we can offer something like that next to the learn with the Enfocus sessions, that might be something very good. Like you see this, and then we offer you some sample files and go ahead. Not the exact same file that we've seen, but the same things, you know, some extending of bleed, some page size changes, some things like that. We will look into that.
Natasha,
muted.
Do something.
Unmute.
Natasha, we have hit the 1 hour mark. It's now 2 o'clock, and I know some of our attendees probably have to go because it's getting, you know, that's all they have time for. Obviously, we can continue on for a little bit to try to cover some of the other topics that we meant to cover today, because we want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to get these questions out of the way. But so I just want to break in for a second, and for those of you who do have to take off, before you go, I'd love to find out, you know, really was this webinar very useful for you at all today? If it was, please let us know if this was a useful webinar. And actually, it looks like Steve has to take off too here because, you know, we've ran over time. But let us know, because we'd really like to be able to improve these in the future and make these as useful as possible. And obviously, whether you stay with us or whether you leave us here in a few minutes, if you ever have suggestions for webinars or things that you'd like to see us cover, please email us and let us know what you'd like to see us cover. We're always looking for suggestions. We really want to make sure that we're giving you the kind of information that you need in order to be successful as a customer. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. And thanks, everyone. And for those of you who have to leave and those who want to stick around while we cover the last couple little subjects, we'll do that, and then we'll wrap it up. Natasha, it's all yours.
Okay, so I had 2 more things on the list, the smart pre-flighting and the fonts. So I will go to the smart pre-flighting. So since our version 11, we introduced something that is called smart pre-flighting. What does that mean? Is with pre-flighting, we mean we're going to check our PDF files with certain conditions. So does the PDF has RGB, yes or no? Does the PDF has transparency? What about fonts and stuff like that? We're going to check the PDF for certain things to make sure that the PDF is print ready, for example. Now, when you set up an action, when you set up a pre-flight or an action list, it's smart pre-flight and corrections. You have to set up certain values. So if I would start, or I will take a new document, you can see here, for example, for page size, I have to fill in a page size. I fill in my bleed, for example, information about my bleed, the number of pages. I set all of these information in. I type in a value. Right? So with a smart pre-flight, we're not going to type in a value. We are going to use a variable. Right? So we can say enable variables, and then we can say, oh, I want to use number of pages. Now, what does that mean? That means that instead of you creating 15 pre-flight profiles per jobs you have, because some of them could be 1 page, some of them could be 5 pages, some of them could be any other pages. You can just type it in before you start your job. So you start your job and then you type in the amount of pages that you are going to pre-flight or that the PDF should have, right? So with the smart pre-flights, your job will be driving your pre-flight. Depending on what you have in front of you, will decide how the pre-flight profile will be filled in. So you're not going to create a pre-flight profile with number of pages 5, for example. No, you just say it's a variable. It can vary depending on the job I have. So I want to decide before I do my pre-flight. So if I would run this, well, before I want to run, I kind of want to also show, and I will show that in the variables. You can see here we have a certain paper type. For example, you know your paper type, you don't know the ink coverage. Ink coverage, which is also something you would have to fill in a value. You want to say, I want to check if my ink coverage is, if there are objects with ink coverage more than 200%. Now I do have my paper type, so what you can do is you can set up a variable set, which I will show you because that's where the variables come from, where the ink coverage will be based on what you fill in as paper type. So you can see here, if I type in 5, I have 160. If I type in paper type 1, I have 200. So this is not something I have to fill in. It will be depending on what the paper type is. So now if I would run this onto my document, you will see that it will depend. Here you can see the number of pages not equal, and my trim box size is also incorrect, and there is some total ink coverage problems, right? So the difference or the new thing with the smart preflight is you have variables who come from a variable set, and you will pick or set your values to pre-flight with just before you're going to pre-flight. Now a little bit about the variables, just to show you, you can find it inside the process category. And now just to show you how it could look like, you have your paper type, which is a constant and a number where you fill in or you give the information for the user. As you can see, the mouse over will tell you what the options are. And then the ink coverage is rule based on your paper type. So if the paper type is 1, then use 200. If the paper type is 2, 200, 180, and so on and so on. So this is where you create your variables in your variable sets. So you ask yourself, what are the things that vary depending on my job? And then you create those variables. And then after you created your variables, you can select them in your profile. And instead of filling in the amount of number of pages, you select your variable out of your variable set. And it will be a question before you start pre-flighting. I hope that answered the question. I know the customer asked to set up your variables, So as you can see, it's by clicking on the plus button that you add one. You fill in a name. You give a user readable name that means the mouse over. You select your constant or your rule-based type. You select if it's going to be a number, a length, a text, or a boolean, yes or no could be. And then you fill in your default value. For the rule-based, you're going to have to set up conditions. So as you can see here, you say if the paper type is 1, then use this number, and so on and so on. So you can see here, you can duplicate, you can remove, you can add.
Yeah,
and then that's a tool you can test out your.
That's a very powerful feature. I was going to break in and say, because what's really important about the rule based is if you get smart about the way you set up your variables, you could actually set a variable to be, let's say, like as simple as offset versus digital for the two different kinds of output that you offer or you're heading for in your output. And then the rule-based variables could reset all based on whether offset is selected or digital is selected, making whatever resolution changes, ink changes, that sort of thing that are required for the two different kinds of outputs. So you could literally make your pre-flight profiles completely change off of one value and link them all together, which is a very, very powerful feature when used correctly.
Yep, definitely. So if you would still have trouble setting up your variables, you can definitely give us an email and we will guide you. But those are the options you have. Plus, to add, you add one, you give it a name, and then you select the type, if it's rule or constant, if it's going to be a number, text, or any of the options you have, and that would be the way to set up your variables. Okay, were there any questions about this, Michael?
No real questions about the variables. I did have one question that I think we covered earlier. I'm not sure. We covered quite a bit today, Natasha. Very good. The question is, can you tell your pre-flight check to make sure black text is 100% black and not, composite color, not a rich black? And I believe that's done with applying an action list to your pre-flight profile.
Yep, you could use a pre-flight profile. If you go into the color, there are some options where you could say, if I can find it, impure black, impure gray, and impure black. But it's best to just set up an action list where you select, where you're gonna say select your color text segments, and make sure to log your selection if it's not a specific color. So you have a couple of options here, but an action list would indeed be the option or the solution.
And as you could see there at the bottom of that pre-flight profile, you could add an action list to that profile so it runs along with it, correct?
Definitely.
Yeah, down there at the bottom. That's what we're talking about. So if you need to use the action list to actually go through and make a conversion as part of the processing, you can do that there. So that way it's pre-flighted and stuff like all your rich black text is changed to 100% black only right on the same check in the same run.
Yep, definitely.
All right.
And, if there were no questions about the smart pre-flights, I would go for the fonts, just 5-10 minutes.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so with the fonts, we have the category inside our pre-flight profile. So a couple of checks you have available. I think the most important ones, of course, the embedding. Embedding completely or subsetted. What is the difference between embed completely and subset? Font subset means only the characters used in the file will be able to be reused. Completely embed means the whole font information is inside of the PDF document. So you will be able to reuse the capital A if the capital A was not even in the document as yet. So you have a couple of checks inside our pre-flight profile, so you can run that on your PDF document to see if there are already problems. If you already are aware, you can immediately fix it inside of your pre-flight profile, where you're gonna completely subset and completely embed your fonts. Next to the pre-flight profile, you also have the option to convert text to outlines. Can be done either in your inspector inside of the actions tab, or you can go into your global changes under the fonts, if I'm not mistaken, and then convert to outlines. You can select all fonts, any fonts, all fonts where you're going to define what kind of types or what font type, any font, or you can pick one specific font that you would like to convert to outline. This, of course, can also be done inside of an action list. Again, easy way, right-click on your global change, save as an action list, and you have your action list to build some more actions into it, but that could be a way for you to start working on actions. The remap font is also one powerful tool where you're going to save. For example, you have a font in the document. You have the same font on your system and you're having some issues doing some embedding or whatever you're trying to do, it's giving you some issues. If you have the font on your system, which is kind of always required if you want to embed anyway or convert to outlines, if it's not embedded, then you could remap your font to that specific font from your system. So you select the font you want to remap from, and you select where you can use our font picker, where you can see all the fonts of your system or in your document are on that specific page. Then you can select your font and you can make sure that you change or remap your font to this specific font. You can also see that there's a little preview. If you already get things like this, you have to be careful when you're going to do a remapping because problems might occur. Also, something when I say that is important, remapping from a type 1 to a true type is not really recommended from a type 3 to a type. You try to stay in the type or the font type that you are in today. And sometimes it might work, but it's not recommended to go from another type to a different type, right? So try to stay in the same font type. But this would be a way for you to remap that font from your document to the font to the same font on your system, and then afterwards you will be able to edit characters, make some adjustments, and so on. There's also, and I have to double check that, there's also an action that I would like to highlight or mention. And I think if I do font that I will get it. If it's the change font, yep, it's this one. The change font action is kind of important to say because if you're going to change your font, you can use the resource at runtime and predefined PDF resource. So this is a way, if you would have issues with your fonts, this is a way to make sure that PitStop Pro recreates the font resources. For example, in this, as soon as you hit the button, to run this, you're going to make sure that the font resource is created. So if you would have a corrupt font resource, if you would have corrupt fonts, and you do have that font, just change it to a font from your system. Make sure you recreate your font resources, and that will solve a few of your problems. And in some cases, it will solve all of your problems. I have already recommended that to some of our customers, and after that, they were able to work with the PDF and make the changes they needed to make. Also, select corrupt font width is something that you could kind of run on your document to see if there are corruptions, yes or no. Because I know fonts is still something very sensitive, and you could run into trouble. So you can see here the check on the corrupt font width. So you can run that as well. The checking of your font license to check if your fonts are okay. Are they? In this case, you can see, are they allowed to be embedded, subset, outline, preview, and print? So you want to make sure before you do anything if you have enough licensing to do so, right? And I think we're going to stop here. I know there will probably be some questions not answered yet and some things not covered, but we are really planning to keep on doing these sessions in the future. So if it was not answered, if you still have something like, oh, we did not even touch that, please let us know. So it will be the first one we're going to do in our next session. So let us know what you were missing, and then we will make sure that in the next session, your topic or your question will be answered, or by that time, you will already receive an answer from Enfocus with some information to guide you.
Yeah,
anything you want to add?
Well, obviously, everyone can see I just launched a poll, just kind of asking everyone how often they'd like to see us hold this type of webinar. Just wanted to get a feel for what sort of how much we should try to help out here with this. But yeah, it seems like you covered a lot of stuff for everybody, and the best thing to do is to just follow up at support@enfocus.com if they got any follow-on questions, as well as, we capture all the questions you ask, get captured in this particular webinar session. So if there's anything in particular that we see that we didn't cover, we can get back to you and try to make sure that your particular question got answered. As well as if we covered something and maybe you didn't get it, we have recorded this webinar, so we will try to get this webinar posted here very shortly, and we'll let everyone know when that happens so that you can come view it if you'd like to go back and review any particular parts of this webinar that we held today. So other than that, I think we're good. We ran about 20 minutes over today, but covered lots of good information, that's for sure. So,
Yep. And I'm afraid we could keep on going for a couple of hours.
Yeah, we could. I mean, there's always a lot to cover because obviously there's a lot of different, common problems out there in production, and PitStop Pro is an extremely powerful product, but because of that, it's also knowing where to go for certain kinds of problems. That's really the magic answer. Because I know myself, you can probably do it in PitStop Pro. It's just a matter of knowing where's the best place to go to do it. And sometimes if you use the wrong tool, you can really, really can take you a lot more time than if you found the right tool to get the job done. So that's really the key here is understanding which is the right tool, whether it's an action list, or a profile or a global change. That's really the thing to understand if you really want to master PitStop Pro.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you found this to be informational and you learned something, which according to the survey I launched earlier, about 95% of you thought this was extremely useful for you today and got something out of it, which I'm glad to hear. And again, keep your eyes and ears open for webinars in the future, and we hope that you join us then. And of course, if you have any questions ever, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll be more than happy to try to help you out. So thank you. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, everybody. And again, let us hear from you. Let us know if you're struggling with something.
All right. Take care.